Welcome to Open Mic with yours truly, Mike from the ANU College of Law. Today's guest did a Bachelor of Arts and a Bachelor of Law honors and a GDLP here at ANU, and has gone all the way from Canberra all the way to New York and recently just returned after completing her Masters of Law at Columbia. I have Nishadee Perera. Nish, first of all, congratulations on completing your Masters at Columbia, and I'm glad to have some of your time today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, for those that don't know you, can we just start by you telling me a little bit about yourself, including your current role and what motivates you?
Sure. So my name's Nishadee Perera. I am a Canberran Australian, but also Sri Lankan background. I am a Fulbright Scholar, and that's what enabled me to go over to Columbia to do my Masters. My background is primarily in international law, more specifically in refugee human rights. But I mean, I currently work at the Office of International Law at the Attorney General's Department, and that lets me do a whole host of things. I worked on trade investment matters, law of the sea matters, human rights, refugee law, environmental law. So currently a bit of a generalist in public international law, I'd say.
Recently, you finished your Master's of Law at Columbia in New York. Can you tell me a little bit about that experience? And can you share some highlights of it, if you will?
Sure. So in terms of the experience, I felt extraordinarily grateful as soon as I stepped onto that campus. It's beautiful for anyone who's seen the pictures, but also I think it comes with such a strong sense of fraternity and camaraderie amongst the other master students, the alumni network, and I know that ANU is really building on that these days as well. And I think it's just the access to people that I never would have even dreamed of meeting that really struck me initially. And then what I've come out of it with are just the people I met. I think you really meet your tribe when you go and do an experience like this, because it takes a certain kind of person, I guess, to take a break at this stage of their career to go and study even more. So in terms of highlights, I think academically, one that comes to mind, it's a picture that I'll never get out of my head, is I was taking a human rights class with Sarah Cleveland, who is or was a Human Rights Committee member, so a lot of experience on that UN side of things when it comes to human rights. It was co-taught by Professor Amal Clooney, who, I mean, a lot of people know her celebrity, but as an international lawyer, she's also incredible, an incredible advocate, barrister. And we were doing the freedom of expression class, and she got Edward Snowden on the line, and we were able to ask him questions directly. And I just have this image of Edward Snowden on a screen and Amal Clooney standing right there and Sarah Cleveland to the other side, and they were just engaging with us as if we were their equals. It was mind-blowing when I think back that was a day that happened. But then I think other highlights just kind of come down to the people that you meet and the conversations you have. So like I said, Columbia attracts a certain kind of person, especially for that master's program. And the experience of some of my colleagues is amazing, whether they're Australians who were working in Indigenous Aboriginal rights, people who are working in the commercial sector but have a really unique view of how the commercial sector should be changing and adapting to better accord with current community expectations and corporate responsibility. Through to people in Switzerland and Malaysia and South America. Like, I think it's just that huge diversity of experience and recognizing that we all have that very strong common purpose, and yet understanding the difficulties that we all have faced in the respective fields we're in. I think that was probably the most eye-opening and probably the part that will stick with me for the longest. Onwards.
What was sort of the motivation for you to pursue your masters, and why Columbia? Why was it the choice?
Sure. So in terms of masters, I think it's a little bit of a preordained goal. Like in public international law, it's fairly common for someone to do their master's. And ANU was really great for me in that I really got to even specialize at undergrad level in doing a lot of international law courses. So I knew I wanted to have a different academic experience, and I wanted to go overseas to do my master's. And so then the question really came funding and what was realistic and things like that. But that said, Columbia, I think, offered some great clinical programs and externship opportunities that really attracted me. I also liked their course offerings in that, yes, you're doing an LLM. Yes, you will be able to specialize in international law if that's what you want to do. But I also got to do courses in like coding. I did a course called Rebuilding Government, which is more policy focused. And if I wanted to, I could have broadened out even further. So I think it's that mix of doing, yes, you're specializing, but you also get to expose yourself to new ways of thinking that really attracted me to Columbia.
Cool. And before going over there to study, had you been to New York before, prior to that?
Once. Yeah, so I had gone while I was at ANU for like a model UN debating tour type thing, where they took us to like UNDP and different organizations around the US. So, I mean, I had a bit of a taste, but I didn't really know what the hype was about until I got there.
Yeah. So yeah, because I could imagine, right? I've been to New York before for a holiday and all that, but actually living there, especially coming from Canberra, small town, moving over to Manhattan, big city, must have been some kind of experience, even for roughly just a year, right? Of your life, yeah. Cool.
I mean, I will defend Canberra to my dying breath. I think Canberra's great. But yeah, definitely a change of pace.
Yeah. So you completed a Bachelor of Arts and a Bachelor of Law honors degree here at ANU as well as the GDLP. I was looking over some of the stuff you did in the past, and in an article in 2015, you mentioned that you wanted to be an international lawyer because you wanted to affect global change. And also your interest in international politics stemmed from trying to better understand your own identity as a Sri Lankan growing up here in Canberra, right? What was the ANU experience like for you? And did your time at ANU help you at all in achieving those goals, or perhaps even opening your eyes to other goals instead?
Generally, it was a bit of a very comfortable, nurturing place to do an undergraduate degree. I think that's, I guess, the benefit of being in Canberra as well. But the access that I had to professors who, I wasn't a HG student, I wasn't a medalist kind of student, and yet the amount of attention and care that they gave me and allowed me to really, explore whatever I wanted to explore, and the time they gave me was such a privilege that I think I didn't appreciate until I left uni, and talking to others who didn't have that university experience. And I think those opportunities in terms of an international experience, I mean, I got to go on exchange, I got to go on those like model UN debating tours. I didn't get to do them, but there were plenty of other international opportunities that ANU provides. So I think it was a really great university, given I had that interest in international politics and law, to at least start. In terms of how it helped me in terms of future goals, I think it is that capacity to specialize in international law really early on, which I don't know that I would necessarily encourage others to do. I think it was a lot of luck that I happened to do it and then enjoy it and then find work in it. I know others aren't that lucky. So not that I'm advocating for that approach, but it worked out for me. In terms of other opportunities or other things that opened my eyes to, there was a stage at the end of my degree that I seriously considered teaching.
Right.
So as part of law reform and social justice, I was involved and later got to lead this community legal education project that I think is still running. And I loved it. I loved teaching. I loved helping other students really engage and think about and care about these issues that I cared about in terms of migration, refugees and Indigenous issues. And so being able to share that and knowing that I had been influenced by teachers as well really had me considering that for a long time. And I wouldn't have even thought of it, I think, if it wasn't for those years at ANU.
Well, was it always a goal for you to be a lawyer, or what attracted you to it? Growing up, was it always like, oh, when I get to uni, I'm going to study this, I'm going to be a lawyer?
No, not in the slightest. So I was very much a STEM kid. I did double maths, physics, chemistry. Like you hear about the curry package. That was very much my background. But I also love to write. I really love to write, and I loved expressing myself in writing. And I guess apparently, I don't remember saying this. Apparently, I said something when I was like 8 that I would be the first woman of color on the High Court bench or something like that. Right. Which, I mean, that sounds ridiculous for an 8-year-old to say, so I can't imagine saying that. But no, it wasn't a really long-standing dream. That said, I think when it got to crunch time to figuring out what I wanted to do for my undergrad, law kind of allowed me to keep that analytical skill, which is what I really loved about the STEM subjects. It got me to keep writing, and I was warned that I wouldn't be able to write the kind of things I wanted to write. Law is a different kind of writing, but at least I got to exercise that skill. But also, I think going through those later years of high school and college, it was a vessel for me to better understand the systems that I thought weren't working. I think growing up as a Sri Lankan-Australian, you see, whether it's your family members or your community members kind of rub their heads against systems that don't work, whether that's in Australia or globally. And I just felt that if I could help people navigate that system professionally as well, that's something that I'd be interested in doing, because I'd kind of been doing it my entire life. Yeah, of course. Unprofessionally. So I think that probably motivated part of it as well.
Cool. In regards to your career, your experience spans from, you've worked in legal aid, you work with a judge, you've worked in the Attorney General's department, and more recently, I was looking through your LinkedIn. You said you put there that you were a research assistant to Amal Clooney, which is amazing, right? Just in the sense of how much of a celebrity Amal is. What would you say has been the highlight of your professional journey so far?
Soon after I was working at Legal Aid, I went to work at Asylum Access Malaysia, where I got to do direct client work. And I think even though that was a few years ago now, it remains kind of a driving force. I think working with those clients directly helped me appreciate the reasons why I got into law in the first place. What I do now is at the structural level. And so if you compare what I said in terms of helping people navigate systems to the basic kind of naked eye, it's not what I do right now. So I think being able to have had the opportunity to do that, and there's a couple of clients that come to mind whose stories I think will probably stay with me forever. I think those are the highlights, not because they were glamorous or because they were prestigious. They just touch you. And I think everyone has those moments regardless of what career they pursue, but I think those will be mine for a while at least.
Yep. And what's next for you? What's next in your journey?
Well, I think at this stage, I'll stick to the Office of International Law for a little while. I think I still have a lot to learn in those lawyerly skills and kind of understanding government a bit more, because I think I do want to be eventually really working towards structural changes and reforms. And I think understanding is a big part of that. But I also think what Columbia kind of opened my eyes to was the impact of technology and the opportunities that it brings. And I think that is an area that I would love to contribute more towards. So like while I'm working at Oxford International Law, I think I'll continue to research and work on that side as well. And I don't know where that'll lead, but I think it's important in and of itself.
Now, you and I were having this conversation, just at the end of National Reconciliation Week. We're in the midst of riots and protests in the US and other parts of the world that's calling for equality and justice, all over Asia as well. And your time studying international law and the experience that you've had, visiting other countries and living in the US as a person of color, what are some of the changes that you would want to see in the immediate future and also long term here in Australia and also abroad?
I guess I need to caveat this answer with the fact that I work in government and I work on human rights and refugee law matters. So my comments that I can make publicly are a little bit limited. But I guess also the other thing to recognize is that you mentioned that I was a person of color. And I think being in the US particularly, but also even reflecting on my experience here, the experience of someone who's a Black and Indigenous person of color versus other persons of color are quite distinct. Not to underplay any of the personal and structural day-to-day racism issues that people of color, regardless of particular backgrounds, may face. But I think there is a very distinct experience of people who are Black and Indigenous people of color. So noting that, I guess thinking about my experience in the US as a person of color, it was actually more positive than I perhaps anticipated. I think there was a bit of discussion around going into Trump's America and things like that amongst a lot of the master's students. And yes, there were instances of, engagement with racism when you went to certain states and things like that. But I think the other thing that really impressed me in the US was just seeing how many people of color did occupy positions of leadership. And I guess because of the maturity of these minority populations in terms of how long they've been in the US, I guess that has enabled that experience a little bit more than my experience in Australia, in Canberra. And I'm a firm believer of you can't be what you can't see. And so, I mean, there are people that I've seen who've done very impressive things, and I take a lot of inspiration from them. But I think going to the US, I think I just saw that more. Like I saw, some amazing South Asian, lawyers, entrepreneurs, business owners, consultants, doctors, like it goes on, like artists, comedians, like it was really inspirational to see it. And then I guess being at Columbia, I got to be taught by some of them. And that was really powerful for me. So I think going to your question about what changes I'd like to see, in terms of Indigenous Australians, I think we've heard what they want. I think when we talk about reform and change, it's really important to listen to the people that you're trying to help. And with Indigenous Australians, they've told us what they want as a first step. So I think that's important to listen to. I guess I would love to see more people of color occupy positions of leadership and influence in Australia. And for that to be diverse, just like I said that, my experience as a person of color from South Asian descent is quite different from Black and Indigenous person of color. I think even within that, there are more distinct experiences. And I can't deny the fact that, my specific person of color background, being Sinhalese Buddhist, is going to be very different from someone who's from an even smaller minority, from a more persecuted religion. That's going to be an entirely different conversation. So I think seeing more and more people occupy public positions, I think is really powerful and can really help.
Students this year especially are likely the graduating students are likely entering a very different landscape once they're finished with their university life. Given COVID, just and a lot of the things that are happening around the world, right? How do you think they can stand out and kind of make a difference in their own way once they're done with their studies?
Yeah.
What advice would you give them?
I think in terms of navigating it for yourself, don't pay too much attention to prestige. I think law students generally have a tendency to, I guess, believe in that label, and not to say that those labels are false. And I think you do get really great training, by following those labels. But I think really investigate it. Really think about whether it aligns with your values, what your long-term goals are. Obviously, be financially responsible, but there are ways to balance those concerns. And I think a big part of that is to develop a network. So don't be afraid to reach out to people who you think might have useful information for you or useful perspectives for you. My experience has been that people generally want to help. There are very few people I've met who don't have the time of day to help newly graduated students, or even later on in your career. I think as long as you make an earnest effort to really appreciate what they say and take on their perspective, I think those can often open up more doors than you realize. So yeah, I think in terms of advice, really know your values, invest in your values. And if you don't have a strong network already, or even if you do, start developing it. Because I think it's more open than it's ever been to start doing that.
That's great. That's terrific. Nish, that's all the questions I have. Thank you so much for your time. It was great talking to you. Welcome back to Canberra. And once again, congratulations for, completing your master's, and, good luck with, whatever's next for you, and whatever else you go on doing from here.
Thank you, Mike. It was nice to chat.